Hi everyone. So then, what if I told you that in just 24 hours over 1 million people demanded a new election, but the media won't even talk about it? The BBC, Sky News, all silent. So why is this petition, with 1 million plus voices behind it, being ignored? Is this democracy in action? Or is this government trying to sweep it under the rug? So at time of recording, we have just exceeded 2 million signatures, and we're still counting. People from every corner of the globe are saying, enough is enough, but the government, they're pretending it's no big deal. Is this a flash in the pan or a real warning sign? Why are they so desperate to bury this? This isn't just about a petition, this is about power. This is about a government that's been in office for mere months and already seems to be losing the plot. With every misstep, from tax hikes to economic blunders, they're pushing the public further away. But the question is, why? Why aren't we hearing about it? And what is their real agenda? Stay tuned, because we're about to break down what the government doesn't want you to know. Why are they trying to silence this? And more importantly, are they really listening to the people they're supposed to serve? Let's find out.
Let's talk to Isabel Oakeshott, to talk international editor, of course, as well, on the occasion that, Isabel, we've got now 1.912 signatures on this this petition that the BBC doesn't want to mention, Sky doesn't want to mention it, so you'll have to listen to talk if you want to hear it being talked about. But quite an extraordinary number of people don't seem to think the government are doing a very good job.
What a damning indictment it is on a government that's only been in power for a few months. I mean, this is quite extraordinary. It's only been going for, 24, 36 hours or something, this petition. And of course, Labour will say, oh, it's meaningless, shrug, whatever. But the truth is, this is now gathering global attention. I've just seen the Times of India is running a piece on it. There's television stations in India reporting on it, and I'm sure it will be picked up elsewhere very quickly. And it doesn't have any power as such. There's probably a way of getting out of having a debate on it, because there's certain clause in the small print, if you like, about whether these motions have to be debated that would allow a get out. But it's a very, very powerful insight into just how disillusioned people are already.
Exactly right. And it does make Keir Starmer look on the international stage like a bit of a sort of a wet fish, doesn't it? It looks like he's a dud, because wherever he goes now, people will go, oh yeah, I'm told, I haven't checked this, but there are now more people who want to have another election than actually voted for the Green Party. So I dare say that number will continue to rise. But it makes him look like he's a sort of a dead duck, a walking disaster, because everything he does seems to make people more and more upset. I mean, this morning we've got the CBI, the latest people to come forward to say the budget is an absolute disaster. But Rain Newton-Smith, and I mean, I'm not a big fan of the CBI, as I'm sure you're not either, but they say we must warn today that tax rises like this must never again be done to business. Most companies are going to freeze their hiring plans. Some are going to be forced to lay people off. Some are looking to delay pay rises. You know, we've got the pensioners up in arms, the farmers up in arms. Even Dan Needle, the Labour apparatchik tax expert, has come out and said, yeah, they've got it wrong on farming.
Oh dear, oh dear. I mean, look, the Prime Minister doesn't really need any help, does he, to look like a muppet? Because he already did look like a muppet before this petition. The trouble is, just looking at him, he just doesn't seem to carry any authority. He looks weak, and he looks like a man, just a sort of grey managerial figure who's frankly struggling even to manage a small team, never mind a country.
Right.
It is really concerning for the fact that we've still got another 4 or 5 years of this, and this budget, this blunder budget, is unraveling really rapidly. The government put growth at the heart of its agenda. You know, they were talking about growth before they came in, and it seemed like because they felt that's what they had to say to try to reassure the business community. But nothing that they've done is actually going to create any growth. That's the problem. You know, the economy is flatlining, and it may get a little bit of a bump from Christmas. That usually happens. Obviously, retail sales go up very significantly over the Christmas period, hospitality and so on. But essentially we're really bumping along the bottom, and none of what Rachel from accounts, should we call her, has done seems to point in the direction of any kind of growth boost or injection.
No. Well, quite the reverse. I mean, unemployment's going up, inflation's going up, the energy prices are going up, so inflation's going to go higher. Growth is at 0.1, right, I think, for the 3 months up to September, probably likely to go into negative for the final quarter of the year, even though, as you say, despite the Christmas bump. But, I mean, I've got this from somebody called Natalie down in Cornwall about the school systems as well. How about this? Grammar and gifted STEM schools set up in poor areas are now being flooded by wealthy kids whose parents can't pay the fees. Now poor kids can't get in, and house prices in poor towns have gone up beyond what we can afford. For example, kids from the Ben Ainsley private school in Truro are now going to Nexus in Camborne, one of the poorest towns in the UK, thus taking away any chance poor kids have of levelling up out of poverty. This has pushed up the price of a 3-bedroom house to £270,000 when the average salary is 14. And that's the effect of Rachel Reeves' budget, basically.
Yeah, I mean, she should have left well alone with the private school system. Parents already paying crippling amounts to take their children into the private system, generally not because they're crashing snobs, but because they want to do whatever they can to give their children a reliably brilliant education, which unfortunately you can't always get in the state sector.
Right.
So why upend that and then be surprised when it has unintended consequences? There's something else I want to bring up this morning, which is on the farmers and that gathering sort of anger after last week's protests. I was contacted over the weekend, somebody alerting me to the fact that widows are very unfairly disadvantaged, further disadvantaged by what the government is doing here on farmers. So if you are a widow, you've lost your husband or wife, Mr. or Mrs. Farmer, recently, you are very, very heavily, badly affected by this new inheritance tax measure, or rather your children are, because they're not able to take advantage of the double allowance from one spouse to another. So it's a real widow's tax, this, on farmers. And I think that's something that hasn't quite been explored or highlighted enough yet.
No, quite. Well, like many of the things that they've done, it doesn't look as if they've actually looked through to the back end of the report that they were given by the Treasury, because they haven't really factored in all of the different ramifications of all of these taxes they put on. I mean, we found out last week that they're only going to get 500 million out of the farmers if it all works out for them, but they're giving away 500 million to farmers in Asia, in Africa and in South America for climate change. We learned this morning that the COP29 meeting was not only still going on, but we've apparently agreed to pay our share of a £239 billion climate fund for this year alone. I mean, what's going on?
I mean, that is just absolutely ridiculous. And no prime minister or leader of our country should have any truck with that whatsoever. No, especially not a government that is bleating day in, day out about black holes in the public finances. Yeah. There's no need whatsoever for the UK to be paying some kind of reparations for the Industrial Revolution. I mean, I'm laughing because it is almost comically ridiculous. And how anyone can be signing up to this absolutely beats me, especially since China seems to be a beneficiary of this. I mean, what a joke. What an absolute insult to the people of our country.
I know, it is extraordinary. I've also discovered over the course of the last couple of hours that we've apparently sent old Dr. Tedros, remember him from the World Health Organization, another 310 million to keep them going to fancy dinners around the world.
I mean, evidently the magic money tree is still producing plenty of fruit for this Labour government to chuck down to anyone that it sees fit to benefit, rather than actually the British people. I genuinely, I just don't know what is going on in their minds, this lot, and how they're allocating these types of very large sums to these kind of supranational and international organisations, when people in our own country are really struggling.
Yeah. Exactly right, and nobody wants it. Nobody asked for it. They didn't promise it. You know, they didn't get elected on the principle that, you know, we're going to spend a bucket load of money of yours on climate change. A lot of people saying to me this morning as well, particularly in Wales, an awful lot of the effects of the climate change manoeuvrings that we've done, cutting down trees, you know, taking reservoirs out of use, making sure that in one case in Wales a wall was removed and it was replaced by some railings which don't actually stop water at all. That an awful lot of the flooding that's going on is is down to many of the measures that local councils have taken over the course of the last decade to try and sort of, you know, stem climate change.
Yeah, I mean, there's quite a lot of debate about that, isn't there, and the extent to which measures are ostensibly to do with climate change and making things better environmentally are actually leading to quite the reverse. And certainly industrial farming, the bigger farms get, the worse that tends to be for flooding, because you get more monoculture, soils get thinner, and that will be another effect of this inheritance tax. If farms are breaking up and in the end you have a smaller number of much larger farms, that is not going to be good for the environment either. I mean, everything's a shambles, isn't it? These floods caused absolute chaos on the transport system last night. Half my family had an utter misery. It was like, you know, probably Hannibal had an easier time crossing the Alps with his elephants than it was to get from London anywhere out to the countryside last night. Already trains don't run properly on a Sunday anyway. It rains a bit heavily and there's a bit of wind and, you know, everything disintegrates.
I know, absolutely. Let me just finish up with a story in the Mail today on page 13. I don't know if you've seen it, but it involves our old friend, Labour peer Tom Watson. Apparently he's become a paid advisor to a company called Palantir. Now, I hadn't heard of these people before now, but you may know them. Apparently, they're a CIA-linked data mining company run by, in Britain, Louis Mosley, a nephew of young Max Mosley. You might remember him from the good old days of tabloid newspaper coverage. Lord Watson, of course, was given £540,000 in donations from Max Mosley at one time. He's now declared on his members' interests in the House of Lords that he's got a deal to operate for them in some form of advisory role. They are paid, and this is the bit that shocked me, £330 million. They've got a contract with the NHS to operate some kind of data mining situation, handling British patients' sensitive details. These are the kind of things that you find out about, and they're quite shocking about the way Britain is run.
Yeah, I mean, these vast contracts are right across the NHS, and they're often for things that no one knows about, and some of them may be valid and provide a good service and others don't. Palantir definitely rings a bell with me. I'm no expert on it, but it's a pretty well-known company, and is hoping that that company is doing a very good job, because one thing the NHS is not good at is looking after people's data and actually managing records well. And it's still the case that despite the fact that successive health secretaries have promised the total seamless patient record on computers, it's still the case that if you turn up at A&E with something wrong with you, many a times they can't find any records about you whatsoever, and you or your relative have to tell your story half a dozen times to a dozen people. So I don't know. I just hope that we're not throwing many, many hundreds of millions at yet more failed systems.
No, you would like to think so, but we shall investigate and come back to you.